guide, and give hope to millions, echoing the profound truth that love conquers all.
Samuel and Saul, the rise of Israel's first king. Last time, we learned about Samuel, a boy dedicated to God who grew up to be a great leader of Israel. Today, we'll see what happens as Samuel gets older and faces new challenges. Samuel was a wise leader, but his own sons, Joel and Abijah, didn't follow his good example. They were greedy, took bribes, and didn't care about being fair. This made the people of Israel very unhappy because they didn't want leaders like that. The people of Israel looked around and noticed that other nations had kings. They thought having a king would solve their problems, so they asked Samuel for a king. But Samuel knew this wasn't a good idea. He warned them that a king would make them do hard work and take their things. But the people insisted, so Samuel prayed to God. God told Samuel to listen to the people, and soon after, he sent Saul to Samuel. Saul was a tall and strong young man, just out looking for his father's lost donkeys when he met Samuel. Little did Saul know, his life was about to change. Samuel took a special jar of olive oil and poured it over Saul's head. This was a way to show that Saul was chosen by God for an important job to be king. Saul felt God's spirit come upon him, and he started to change into a leader. Not everyone was sure about Saul at first, but then he led Israel to a big victory in battle, and everyone cheered. They threw a huge party to celebrate and officially made Saul their king. But being king was tough. Saul made some big mistakes. He didn't wait for Samuel and offered a sacrifice to God by himself, which was against God's rules. And another time, he didn't follow God's instructions during a battle. Because of this, Samuel told Saul that God would find a new king. Saul's story teaches us that even kings need to follow God's instructions. It's important to listen to wise advice and always try to do what's right. Next time, we'll learn about who God chooses to be king after Saul. Can you guess who it might be? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next exciting Bible adventure.
The Saga of Deborah, a judge of Israel. Today, we journey back to a time of heroes and battles in ancient Israel, where a remarkable leader named Deborah made her mark. Let's unravel her story. Long ago, after Joshua led the Israelites into the Promised Land, the tribe settled in. They faced many challenges, including battles with the Canaanites. Some tribes conquered their foes, while others mingled, blending their cultures. But as the memory of Joshua faded, a troubling pattern began. A new generation arose, one that forgot the deeds and the divine guidance their ancestors revered. They strayed, doing what was forbidden, and the cycle of chaos spun anew. In these dark times, when there was no king, leaders known as judges emerged. They were more than arbitrators. They were deliverers, chosen to rescue Israel from its adversaries and guide them back to the right path. Among these judges was Deborah, a prophetess, a wise woman with a fierce spirit. As Israel faltered under the oppression of King Jabin of Canaan, Deborah saw the suffering of her people and knew she had to act. She called upon Barak, a warrior, and said unto him, "Gather 10,000 men, and at Mount Tabor take your stand. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, to you." Hesitant, Barak agreed, but only if Deborah would go with him. She agreed, but she warned him, "The honor of victory will not be yours. The Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." And so it happened. Deborah and Barak went to war. With a great clash, the Israelite warriors charged, and though they were outnumbered, they won a spectacular victory. Sisera fled, seeking refuge in the tent of Yael. Trusting her, he rested, but Yael knew what she must do for her people. In a decisive, if not grisly act, she ended his tyranny, securing peace for Israel. Deborah's legacy as a judge was marked not only by her victory but by her leadership and courage. She inspired her people and led them through a time when heroes were needed to rise. Join us next time as we continue the tales of the judges, uncovering more stories of bravery and faith. Thank you for joining me on this historical adventure. If you enjoyed this tale of Deborah, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell so you won't miss our next episode. Share this journey into the past with your friends and keep the legacy alive.
The story of King Solomon. Today, we journey back to a time of peace, under the rule of a wise king who dreamed big. After King David's reign, his son Solomon took the throne, and with it, the task of building a house for the Lord. King Solomon, eager to fulfill his father David's dream, planned to construct a magnificent temple. This wouldn't be just any building, but a beautiful, sacred place where all the people could worship. Imagine a place so majestic, it took your breath away. First, Solomon needed materials. He found the perfect large stones and had them cut down to a size far from the temple site to keep the construction peaceful and reverent. But Solomon also needed wood, lots of it, and the best quality cedar from the city of Tyre. King Hiram of Tyre, a good friend of his father David, agreed to help. In exchange for food from Israel, Hiram sent cedar trees down the Mediterranean Sea on rafts. This shows how important friendships and alliances can be, even for a king. Solomon also enlisted a skilled craftsman named Huram from Tyre. Huram was an expert in working with bronze, and he crafted many of the intricate designs and structures for the temple. The temple was to be 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet tall with 3 floors. It even had a special room called the Most Holy Room. Inside, the walls were adorned with carvings of cherubim, the palm trees, and flowers. And the room housed the Ark of the Covenant, protected by 2 giant cherubim with outstretched wings. After 7 years, the temple was finally completed. Solomon then held a grand ceremony to dedicate it to the Lord. When the priests placed the ark in the most holy room, a cloud filled in the temple, signaling God's presence and approval. Solomon wasn't just a great builder, he was also known for his incredible wisdom. He once asked God for wisdom above all else, and God granted it. Solomon's proverbs and sayings are still read today for guidance. King Solomon's story teaches us about the importance of wisdom, dedication, and worship. He used his gifts to create a lasting legacy that honored God and led his people. What can we build with the gifts that we've been given? How can we use our talents to serve and honor others? Think. Thank you for joining us on this royal adventure. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell for more biblical tales. Share what you have learned today with a friend, and keep exploring the wonders of the past.
The story of Ruth, a tale of faith and redemption. Once upon a time, in the land of Judah, there lived a family, Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. But their land was struck by a terrible famine, and they had to leave their home in Bethlehem in search of food. They traveled to a faraway place called Moab, hoping for a better life. In Moab, Elimelech passed away, leaving Naomi alone with her 2 sons. The boys grew up and married 2 lovely Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. But as time passed, tragedy struck again. Both Mahlon and Chilion passed away, leaving Naomi heartbroken and alone in a foreign land. When Naomi heard that the famine in Judah had ended, she decided to return to her homeland. Orpah tearfully said goodbye and went back to her family, but Ruth refused to leave Naomi's side. With unwavering loyalty, Ruth declared, "Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay.
Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God." Together, Naomi and Ruth embarked on the journey back to Bethlehem. Upon their arrival, Ruth went to the fields to gather grain. Following the custom of gleaning, where the poor could pick up leftover grain after the harvest, by chance, she found herself in the fields of a kind man named Boaz, who was a relative of Naomi. Boaz noticed Ruth's diligence and kindness and instructed his workers to leave extra grain for her. He showed her great kindness and protection. Later, Naomi encouraged Ruth to seek Boaz's help as their kinsman redeemer, someone who could care for them and their land. Ruth bravely approached Boaz and asked for his help. Boaz, moved by her sincerity, promised to do all he could to help them. He even negotiated with another relative who had the first right to help them. But when he declined, Boaz gladly took on the responsibility. In a beautiful gesture of commitment, Boaz married Ruth and took care of Naomi and her land. Ruth and Boaz were blessed with a son named Obed, who would become the grandfather of King David. And so, through Ruth's loyalty, bravery, and faith, she became part of a remarkable story of redemption and hope. A story that would echo through the generations and eventually lead to the birth of Jesus Christ. The end.
Moses, from prince to leader. Long ago in Egypt, Moses, a prince raised in Pharaoh's palace, faced a moment that would change his life. Despite his royal upbringing, Moses never forgot he was a Hebrew at heart. One day, he saw an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew slave. Feeling a rush of protectiveness, Moses looked around and, seeing no one, stepped in to save the slave but ended up making a grave mistake. The very next day, Moses tried to stop a fight between two Hebrews, only to realize his secret was out. The news even reached Pharaoh, forcing Moses to flee to a faraway land called Midian for safety. In Midian, Moses found himself by a well, where he helped the 7 daughters of Reuel, a priest, fend off some rude shepherds. Impressed by Moses' bravery, Reuel invited him home, leading to Moses marrying Reuel's daughter and starting a new life as a shepherd. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, the Hebrews suffered greatly under a new pharaoh. Their cries for help reached the heavens, and God was listening. 40 years had passed since Moses left Egypt. While tending his flock, Moses saw something incredible. A bush engulfed in flames that didn't seem to burn up. Curious, Moses went closer, only to hear God's voice calling him by name. God told Moses to take off his sandals, for he was standing on holy ground. God had a mission for Moses to lead the Hebrews out of Egypt and free them from slavery. Moses was scared and unsure, especially about speaking to Pharaoh. But God showed Moses miraculous signs, turning his staff into a serpent and then back again, and even curing his hand from leprosy to prove his power. Still hesitant, Moses worried about his speaking abilities. God, growing impatient with Moses' doubts, promised Aaron, Moses' brother, would help speak for him. Moses bid farewell to Jethro and set off to Egypt with his family. In the mountains, Aaron met Moses, and together they shared God's plan with the Hebrew leaders, who were amazed by the signs and worshipped God, filled with hope. Moses and Aaron then bravely approached Pharaoh, delivering God's message, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh's heart was hard. He refused to listen. God was ready to show his great power to change Pharaoh's mind, marking the beginning of an epic journey for Moses, from a prince in Egypt to a shepherd in Midian, and finally, a leader of his people. The end.
Hello, friends. Today we're diving into the amazing story of Jonah to learn how we find redemption. The amazing story of Jonah. God told Jonah to go to Nineveh, a great city in Assyria, and preach a message of repentance. But Jonah didn't want to go. Instead, he tried to run away to a place called Tarshish, which was 2,200 miles away from Joppa, where he started. Nineveh was only 600 miles away. But Jonah really didn't want to go there because the people of Nineveh were enemies of Israel. So Jonah got on a ship to Tarshish. While Jonah was on the ship, God sent a huge storm. The sailors were terrified and found out Jonah was running away from God. They asked him what they should do, and Jonah told them to throw him overboard. As soon as they did, the storm stopped and Jonah was swallowed by a giant fish. Inside the belly of the fish, Jonah prayed to God. He repented for trying to run away and promised to do what God asked. After 3 days and 3 nights, the fish spit Jonah out onto dry land. Jonah was safe, and he was ready to follow God's command. Jonah went to Nineveh and delivered God's message. In 40 days, Nineveh will be destroyed. The people of Nineveh believed Jonah. They fasted and prayed, and even the king declared a citywide fast. Everyone, including the animals, was involved. Because they repented, God decided not to destroy the city. Even though the people of Nineveh repented, and God spared the city, Jonah was upset. He went to a place outside the city and made a shelter for himself, hoping to see Nineveh destroyed. God sent a vine to grow over Jonah's shelter to give him shade and make him more comfortable. But then, God sent a worm to eat the vine and a hot wind to make Jonah uncomfortable. Jonah cared more about his own comfort than the people of Nineveh. This story of Jonah is more than just about a giant fish. God sent many things to accomplish his purpose. Jonah to Nineveh, a storm to the ship, the fish to swallow Jonah, the vine to give him shade, the worm to destroy the vine, and the scorching wind. It teaches us that God's plans are bigger than our own and that He cares about all people. So, friends, Jonah's story shows us that we can't run away from God's plans. It also teaches us the power of repentance and God's mercy. What can you learn from Jonah's journey today? The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Hello, adventurers. Today we're going to hear an incredible story about faith, courage, and standing up for what's right. It's the story of Daniel and his friends in Babylon. Let's begin. Once upon a time, the powerful King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon conquered Jerusalem. He took many treasures from the temple of God and brought some of the finest young men from Israel to serve in his palace. Among them were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who were given new Babylonian names: Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These young men were chosen for their intelligence, good looks, and potential. They were trained for 3 years in the language and literature of Babylon, and the king provided them with the best food and wine. But Daniel and his friends decided to honor God by not eating the king's rich food. Instead, they asked for vegetables and water. Despite the simple diet, they became healthier and stronger than all the others. Now, let's move forward to another amazing part of their story. King Nebuchadnezzar built a giant statue of gold and commanded everyone to bow down and worship it. Anyone who refused would be thrown into a blazing furnace. When the music played, everyone bowed down except for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They stood tall, refusing to worship the statue. Some of the king's advisors, who were jealous of these young men, reported them to the king. Furious, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and demanded they worship the statue. But they courageously replied, "We do not need to defend ourselves. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us. But even if He doesn't, we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold." This made the king even angrier. He ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and had the strongest soldiers tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace. The fire was so hot that it killed the soldiers who threw them in. But something miraculous happened. As King Nebuchadnezzar watched, he saw not 3, but 4 men walking around in the fire, unharmed. The 4th looked like a divine being. Amazed, the king called them out of the furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked out completely unharmed. Not a hair on their heads was singed. and they didn't even smell of smoke. Nebuchadnezzar praised their God, saying, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants." They trusted in him and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. He then declared that no one should say anything against their God, for no other God can save in this way. The story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego teaches us about the power of faith and standing up for what's right, even in the face of danger. Their unwavering trust in God protected them and showed others his incredible power. What can we learn from their courage today? How can we stand strong in our faith and trust God, no matter what challenges we face?
Daniel and the lion's den. Once upon a time, in the kingdom of Babylon, a wise and faithful man named Daniel served under King Darius. The king loved Daniel and planned to make him the leader over all his kingdom. This made some of the king's wise men very jealous. They wanted to find a way to bring Daniel down. The wise men knew that Daniel was devoted to praying to his God. They plotted together and came up with a sneaky plan. They approached King Darius and convinced him to make a new law. This law stated that anyone who prayed to any god or man other than the king for 30 days would be thrown into a lion's den. The king, not realizing their true intent, agreed and signed the law. Despite the new law, Daniel chose to pray to God just as he always had. He would kneel by his window 3 times a day, giving thanks and asking for God's help. The jealous wise men were watching and saw Daniel praying. They immediately went to King Darius and reported that Daniel was breaking the new law. The king was distressed. He realized that he had been tricked by his own wise men, but there was nothing he could do. The law was the law, and even the king had to obey it. With a heavy heart, King Darius ordered that Daniel be thrown into the lion's den. That night, the king couldn't eat or sleep. He was so worried about Daniel. He stayed awake, fasting and praying that Daniel's God would protect him. Early the next morning, as soon as the sun began to rise, King Darius rushed to the lion's den. With a trembling voice, he called out, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to rescue you from the lions?" From deep within the den, Daniel's voice came back, strong and clear. "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel, and he shut the mouths of the lions. They have not hurt me, because I was found innocent in his sight. Nor have I ever done any wrong before you, your majesty." Overjoyed, the king ordered that Daniel be lifted out of the den. Everyone was amazed to see that Daniel was completely unharmed. Not a scratch was found on him because he had trusted in his God. The king was so happy that Daniel was safe. He decided to punish the men who had tricked him. They were thrown into the lion's den, and this time, the lions did not stay calm. King Darius then made a new decree to his entire kingdom. He taught his people about the power and goodness of Daniel's God. For he is the living God, and he endures forever. His kingdom will not be destroyed. His dominion will never end. He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders in the heavens and on the earth. He has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions. So friends, the story of Daniel in the lion's den is a powerful reminder of the importance of faith and trust in God. Daniel's unwavering belief in God protected him from harm and showed everyone around him the might and mercy of the true God. Please show me your support and love through likes, shares, subscribes, and comments. Every support helps me keep going. Here are some important lessons we can learn from Daniel's story. 1. Asterisk, asterisk. Trust in God. No matter the circumstances, trusting in God gives us strength and courage. 2. Asterisk, asterisk. Stand firm in your faith. Like Daniel, stay true to your beliefs, even when it's difficult. 3. God protects the faithful. God's protection and care are with those who are faithful to Him. 4. Courage in the face of danger. Daniel's courage in the lion's den shows us that we can face our fears with God's help. So how can we apply these lessons in our own lives? By being kind, honest, and brave, and by trusting in God's plan for us even when we face challenges. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into an incredible story of bravery, faith, and justice. Our tale begins in the Grand Kingdom of Persia, where a young Jewish woman named Esther becomes queen and faces a challenge that will test her courage and faith. This is the story of Queen Esther and how she stood up for justice. Once upon a time, in the Kingdom of Persia, there was a mighty king named Xerxes. He ruled over 127 provinces, stretching from India to Kush. King Xerxes was known for his vast wealth and power. In the 3rd year of his reign, he held a magnificent banquet for all his nobles, officials, and military leaders to showcase his kingdom's splendor. This celebration lasted a full 180 days, followed by a 7-day feast in the king's palace garden for everyone in the citadel of Susa. Amidst the festivities, Queen Vashti, the wife of King Xerxes, also held a banquet for the women in the royal palace. On the 7th day of the feast, when King Xerxes was in high spirits from wine, he commanded his 7 eunuchs to bring Queen Vashti before him, wearing her royal crown, to display her beauty to his guests. But Queen Vashti refused to come, which enraged the king. Furious and humiliated, King Xerxes consulted his advisors, who suggested that Queen Vashti be deposed to prevent other women in the kingdom from disrespecting their husbands. The king agreed, and Vashti was removed from her royal position. As time passed, King Xerxes began to miss Vashti and regret his decision. His attendants proposed a solution, a search for the most beautiful young women in the kingdom, to find a new queen. This is where our heroine, Esther, enters the story. Esther was a young Jewish woman living in the citadel of Susa. She was raised by her cousin Mordecai after her parents died. Esther was known for her beauty and grace. When the king's order was proclaimed, Esther, along with many other young women, was brought to the palace and placed under the care of Hegai, the king's eunuch in charge of the harem. Esther quickly won Hegai's favor, and he provided her with beauty treatments, special food, and 7 attendants from the king's palace. Esther kept her Jewish heritage a secret, as Mordecai had instructed her. Each day, Mordecai walked near the courtyard of the harem to find out how Esther was doing. After 12 months of beauty treatments, Esther's turn came to go to the king. She asked for nothing except what Hegai suggested, and she won the favor of everyone who saw her. When Esther was taken to King Xerxes, he was captivated by her beauty and grace, and he placed the royal crown on her head, making her the new queen. Now, let's turn our attention to a man named Haman, who was elevated to a high position by King Xerxes. All the royal officials knelt down and paid honor to Haman, except for Mordecai, who refused to bow down to him. This enraged Haman, and he sought revenge not only against Mordecai, but against all the Jews in the kingdom. Haman approached King Xerxes and described the Jews as a threat to the kingdom, persuading the king to issue a decree to destroy, kill, and annihilate all the Jews on a single day. The decree was sent out to all the provinces, and the Jews were thrown into great mourning. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the city, wailing loudly and bitterly. Esther's attendants informed her of Mordecai's distress, and she sent clothes for him to wear, but he refused. Esther then sent Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, to find out what was troubling Mordecai. Mordecai explained the decree to Hathach and asked him to urge Esther to go before the king and plead for her people's lives. Esther replied that anyone who approached the king without being summoned would be put to death unless the king extended his gold scepter. Mordecai's response to Esther was profound. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone will escape. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Moved by Mordecai's words, Esther asked him to gather all the Jews in Susa to fast for 3 days. She and her attendants would do the same. She resolved to go to the king, even if it meant risking her life, saying, "If I perish, I perish." On the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace. When the king saw her, he was pleased and extended the gold scepter. Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. The king asked her what she wanted, promising to grant her request up to half the kingdom. Esther invited the king and Haman to a banquet she had prepared. At the banquet, the king again asked Esther what she wanted. She requested that the king and Haman join her for another banquet the next day. Haman left the banquet in high spirits, but his joy turned to rage when he saw Mordecai, who still refused to bow to him. Haman's wife and friends suggested he set up a pole and ask the king to have Mordecai impaled on it. That night, the king couldn't sleep and ordered the book of the Chronicles to be read to him. He learned that Mordecai had uncovered a plot to assassinate him and had never been rewarded. The next day, Haman came to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai. Before he could, the king asked Haman how to honor someone. Thinking the king meant to honor him, Haman suggested a royal robe, a horse, and a parade through the city. To his shock, the king ordered Haman to do this for Mordecai. Haman obeyed, leading Mordecai through the streets. He returned home in grief, and his wife and friends predicted his downfall. Haman was then hurried to Esther's second banquet. During the banquet, the king asked Esther her request once more. Esther revealed Haman's plot to destroy her people, the Jews. The king, furious, left the room. Haman begged Esther for his life. When the king returned and saw Haman on the couch where Esther was reclining, he accused Haman of attacking the queen. One of the eunuchs informed the king about the pole Haman had set up for Mordecai. The king ordered Haman to be impaled on it. That same day, the king gave Esther Haman's estate, and Mordecai was promoted to a high position in the kingdom. But the story doesn't end there. Esther pleaded with the king to issue a new decree to save the Jews. The king allowed Mordecai to write a decree granting the Jews the right to defend themselves. The decree was sent out, and on the appointed day, the Jews triumphed over their enemies. The Jews celebrated their victory, and the Feast of Purim was established to commemorate their deliverance. Mordecai became second in rank to King Xerxes, and he continued to work for the good of his people. The story of Esther teaches us the power of courage, faith, and standing up for justice. Esther's bravery and willingness to risk her life saved her people and changed the course of history. Her story reminds us that we all have a role to play in making the world a better place, and sometimes we are called to take a stand, even when it's difficult. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales from history and beyond. Until next time, remember to stand up for justice and have faith in the power of doing what's right.
Once upon a time, in a world where people had forgotten to be kind, there lived a man named Noah who worshipped God. Noah was a man of faith, but everyone else around him disobeyed and hated God. One day, something shocking happened. God spoke to Noah, revealing a plan to destroy the wicked world, sparing only Noah's family. God instructed Noah to build a wooden ark, a boat big enough for his family and many animals. Noah got to work, following God's exact instructions. Probably, people mocked Noah as he explained why he was building an ark. But Noah kept building, also spreading the word about God, though nobody listened. As the ark neared completion, God brought animals of all kinds, 7 of some species, 2 of others, birds and beasts, tiny and tall, all made their way to the ark. Perhaps people shouted insults at Noah, but they did not stop sinning against God. They did not ask to enter the ark. Finally, all the animals and birds were aboard. God invited Noah and his family into the ark. As they entered, God shut the door. Then the rain came, a great downpour soaking the earth for 40 days and nights. Floodwaters covered towns and villages. The ark floated on top of the rising waters, sheltering Noah from the flood. After 5 months, a drying wind sent by God brought the ark to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Noah and his family waited inside as the water lowered. Noah sent a raven and a dove out. The dove returned with an olive leaf, a sign that the earth was slowly drying. God told Noah it was time to leave the ark. Together, Noah and his family unloaded the animals. Noah, filled with gratitude, built an altar and worshipped God who had saved him and his family from the awful flood. God gave Noah a wonderful promise. Never again would he send a flood to judge human sin. As a great reminder of this promise, God gifted the world with a rainbow, a beautiful sign of his covenant. And so, Noah and his family found new beginnings after the flood. In time, his descendants repeopled the whole earth, and all nations came from Noah and his children.
God's promise to Abraham. Long ago, after a big flood washed the earth clean, only Noah and his family were safe on a big boat with lots of animals. When the water went away, people started to build things again. They had a big idea. Let's build a tall tower that touches the sky, right up to the stars. They wanted to stay together and be friends forever. But something magical happened. Suddenly, everyone started speaking in different languages. It was so confusing because nobody could understand each other anymore. So, the people split up, finding new places to live with others who spoke the same language. The big city they left behind was called Babel, which means a big mix-up. Then, in a place called Ur, God talked to a man named Abram. God said, "Abram, go on an adventure to a special land I'll show you." Abram, his wife Sarai, and his nephew Lot packed up and went to a beautiful land called Canaan. Canaan was filled with green fields and clear blue skies. Abram and Lot had so many sheep and cows. The land they were living on didn't have enough grass and water for all the animals. So, the workers of Abraham and Lot started arguing over the best spots for their animals to eat and drink. Abram wanted everyone to be happy and not fight. He told Lot, "Let's not argue. You choose any part of the land you like, and I'll go the other way." That way, there was enough room for all their animals. Lot looked around and saw a really nice area with lots of water and green grass near the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. It looked like the best spot for his animals, so he chose to move there. Abraham stayed in the land of Canaan,
where God asked him to stay, even though Abraham and Lot had to live apart to stop the arguing. Abraham made sure they did it in a kind and peaceful way, showing he was a really good uncle and a wise man. God saw Abraham's kind heart and told him, "This whole big, beautiful land will belong to you and your children and their children after them, forever." But Abraham and Sarai were very old and didn't have any children. They wondered, how will God's promise come true? One day, 3 special visitors brought amazing news. "Sarai, you're going to have a baby." Sarai laughed because she thought she was too old for that. God also changed their names to Abraham and Sarah to show they were going to start a big family. Then, God said he had to fix the 2 naughty cities near where Lot lived. Abraham was worried for Lot. Lot listened to the angels and escaped with his daughters. But Lot's wife looked back and turned into a salt statue. Then, the most wonderful thing happened. Even though they were very old, Abraham and Sarah had a baby boy named Isaac. Isaac, which means laughter. They were so happy and amazed at God's miracle. Abraham knew then that God always keeps his promises, like giving him a big family and a beautiful land to live in. And that's the story of how Abraham and Sarah learned to trust in God's promises, no matter how impossible they seemed. The end.
Once upon a starry night, in a land filled with whispers of the past and promises for the future, Abraham, a man known for his kindness and faith, received a very tough test from God. God asked him to do something unimaginable, to offer his dearest son Isaac as a special gift back to God. This was to see if Abraham trusted God above all else, even more than he loved his precious son. Abraham's heart felt heavy, like a stone sinking in a deep, deep ocean. But deep inside, he knew he had to trust God, no matter how hard it seemed. So, with a brave yet heavy heart, he prepared for the journey. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in soft hues of pink and orange, Abraham, Isaac, and their 2 faithful servants set off on a journey filled with uncertainty. Abraham carried the fire and a knife, while Isaac, unaware of what was to come, carried the wood for the fire. As they neared the mountain that God had told them about, Abraham asked his servants to wait for them at the foot of the mountain. "Isaac and I will go up to worship, and then we'll come back to you," he said with a gentle smile. Climbing the mountain, Isaac, with a curious twinkle in his eye, asked, "Father, we have the wood and the fire, but where is the lamb for the offering?" Abraham, with a heart full of hope, replied, "My son, God will take care of it. He will provide the lamb for the offering." Reaching the top, Abraham built an altar, the most difficult one he ever had to make. He arranged the wood, and with a heart weighed down by a sea of emotions, he gently placed Isaac on the altar, ready to show God that he trusted him completely. But just as Abraham raised the knife, a voice as powerful as thunder, but as gentle as a whisper, stopped him. "Stop, Abraham." It was an angel sent by God. The angel said, "You've shown that you trust God above all by being willing to give up your only son." Then Abraham saw a ram caught in some nearby bushes. With a heart bursting with relief and gratitude, he untied Isaac, and together they offered the ram to God. It was a moment filled with so much joy and thankfulness. Abraham and Isaac returned home, their bond stronger than ever, their hearts filled with the knowledge that when you trust in God, He always provides, just in the right way and at the right time. And so, under the same stars that had witnessed their journey, Abraham and Isaac found comfort
in knowing that no matter what, God's love and care would always guide them, just like it guides us all. The end. The Adventure of Abraham and Isaac, a new beginning. Once upon a time, after a big adventure on a mountain, Abraham and his son Isaac were on their way back home. Then, while the stars twinkled like tiny smiles above them, a kind angel came with a message that made their hearts dance. "Abraham," the angel said, "your family will be as numerous as the stars. And guess what? They're going to bring happiness to the whole wide world." It was like a secret promise about a hero who had come from their family tree, someone very special named Jesus. But when they got back home, they found themselves in a very quiet house. Sarah, the laughter and love of their home, had gone on a journey to the stars. Abraham and Isaac felt very sad, missing her warm hugs and bright smile. Abraham had an idea to bring some joy back into their home. He called his most trusted friend, a wise old servant, and gave him a very important mission. "It's time for Isaac to find a companion, someone to share stories and dreams with," Abraham said. "Please find a kind lady from our family for Isaac." The servant set off on his camels, hoping for a little help from the stars. As he reached a faraway land, he made a wish. "Let the right lady be the one who offers water to my thirsty camels." It wasn't just any wish. It was a special kind of hope that only the kindest hearts could fulfill. Like a scene from a beautiful story, along came Rebekah with a smile as bright as the dawn. She saw the camels, tired and thirsty, and offered them cool, refreshing water. The servant's eyes sparkled with joy. "This must be the one," he thought. She was kind, just like the wish. Rebekah, brave and full of adventure, said yes to a new journey. She traveled across the deserts and mountains to meet Isaac. When Isaac saw her, it was like spring had come to his heart, filling it with flowers and sunshine. Rebekah's kindness and laughter brought new stories and dreams to their home. Isaac and Rebekah, hand in hand, started a wonderful adventure together, full of love and promise. And so, the story of Abraham, Isaac, and now Rebekah reminds us all. After every big adventure, after every sad goodbye, there's always a new beginning, a chance for love and joy to grow again, just like the stars that twinkle in the night sky. The end. Jacob and Esau, a story of brothers and forgiveness. Once upon a time, in a land of ancient wonders, Isaac and Rebekah were blessed with not one, but two sons at the same time. These were no ordinary boys. They were twins named Jacob and Esau. Even before they were born, they were already showing their unique personalities, with Esau loving the thrill of the hunt, and Jacob preferring the quiet of home. Esau, the elder, was as rugged and wild as the forests he roamed, while Jacob, the younger, was thoughtful and clever, always with a plan up his sleeve. Their parents loved them dearly, but each had a favorite, which brewed a little competition between the brothers. One day, as Esau returned from his adventures, famished and weary, Jacob saw an opportunity. He offered Esau a simple meal in exchange for his birthright, the special status of the firstborn. Esau, thinking little of the future, agreed. This moment would change the course of their lives in ways they couldn't imagine. As the boys grew, so did their rivalry, especially when it came time for their father Isaac to bestow his special blessing. Rebekah, who adored Jacob, devised a plan to ensure her favorite son received this honor. With a bit of disguise and a daring heart, Jacob tricked his father and received the blessing meant for Esau. Realizing the deception, Esau was heartbroken and filled with anger. To protect Jacob from Esau's wrath, Rebekah sent him far away to her brother Laban's house, hoping that time would heal the rift between her sons. Jacob's journey was not easy. He worked tirelessly for Laban, enduring trickery and toil, all for the love of Rachel, Laban's daughter. Yet, through these trials, Jacob grew wiser and kinder, learning the value of honesty and hard work. Years passed, and God called Jacob to return home, but the thought of facing Esau filled Jacob with dread. What if Esau still harbored anger and sought revenge? Nevertheless, Jacob set out, hoping for forgiveness. As Jacob neared his homeland, he prepared for the worst. But to his surprise, Esau greeted him not with anger, but with open arms. The brothers embraced, their past grievances washed away by tears of joy. It was a moment of true reconciliation, proving that love can overcome the deepest divides. Together again, Jacob and Esau showed us that it's never too late to mend broken bonds, and that forgiveness is one of the greatest gifts we can offer. The end. Joseph's journey, from dreamer to dreamkeeper. In a land where families were as vast as the stars, Isaac's heart was full of joy as his son Jacob returned home. Even Esau, who once harbored anger, welcomed Jacob with open arms. But not all was peaceful, for Jacob's sons felt a storm brewing in their hearts, troubled by their younger brother Joseph, who was clearly the apple of their father's eye. Joseph, with his bright, colorful coat, a gift from Jacob, was a dreamer. His dreams, however, sparked flames of jealousy among his brothers. In one dream, Joseph saw his own sheaf of grain standing tall, while his brother's sheaves bowed down to it. In another, the sun, moon, and even the stars bowed before him. These dreams whispered of a future where Joseph would rise above them all, even his parents and brothers. One day, Jacob sent Joseph to check on his brothers in the fields. As he approached, their jealousy turned to dark whispers of getting rid of the dreamer. Reuben, the eldest, suggested they put Joseph in a pit instead, secretly planning to save him later. But while Reuben was away, a caravan heading to Egypt appeared. Judah, another brother, proposed they sell Joseph instead of harming him directly. And so, for 20 pieces of silver, Joseph's fate was sealed, and he was taken far from his homeland, his heart heavy with sorrow and fear. The brothers deceived their father, presenting Joseph's colorful coat, now stained with goat's blood, letting Jacob believe his beloved son was gone forever. Jacob's grief was a deep well of sorrow, with no one able to console him. Meanwhile, in Egypt, Joseph found himself a slave in Potiphar's house. Despite his hardships, Joseph's diligence and trust in God shone brightly, earning him Potiphar's favor and the position of chief servant. But just as things seemed to be looking up, Joseph faced a new trial. Potiphar's wife, with dishonest intentions, falsely accused Joseph, leading to his unjust imprisonment. Even in the depths of a dungeon, Joseph's spirit remained unbroken. He understood that through all trials, honoring God was his true strength, a beacon of hope that illuminated even the darkest of places. The end. Joseph's journey from prison to palace. Once upon a time, in a far-off land called Egypt, Joseph found himself in a dark prison, wrongly accused by Potiphar, his former master. But even in such a grim place, Joseph's kindness and helpful nature shone bright. The wardens saw something special in Joseph and trusted him to help organize prison life, making it a better place for everyone. One day, Joseph noticed two new prisoners looking particularly downcast. They were the king's baker and butler, troubled by dreams they couldn't understand. Joseph, with his unwavering faith, assured them, "God can reveal what your dreams mean. Tell me about them." To the butler, Joseph predicted a return to Pharaoh's favor in just 3 days and asked to be remembered. To the baker, however, Joseph had to deliver some unfortunate news. Just as Joseph had said, the butler was restored to his position, but he forgot about Joseph, leaving him in prison. Time passed until one day, Pharaoh himself was troubled by a mysterious dream. Remembering Joseph's gift, the butler finally spoke up, leading to Joseph's summoning. Standing before Pharaoh, Joseph humbly explained that the dream foretold 7 years of abundance, followed by 7 years of famine. He advised Pharaoh to store food during the good years to prepare for the tough times ahead. Impressed by Joseph's wisdom and his clear connection to God, Pharaoh declared, "You will take charge in Egypt, second only to me." And so, Joseph went from prison to palace, overseeing the land's preparations for the coming famine. As predicted, the years of plenty came and went, and famine spread across the land. Back in Joseph's homeland, his family was starving. Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy grain, not knowing that they would come face to face with their long-lost brother, now the lordly ruler of Egypt. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they didn't know him. Recalling his boyhood dreams, Joseph realized that this moment was part of a bigger plan. He tested his brothers, demanding they return with their youngest brother Benjamin to prove their honesty. When they returned, Joseph could no longer hide his true identity. Overcome with emotion, he revealed himself to his brothers, saying, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt." The brothers were speechless, fearing for what might come next. But Joseph comforted them, explaining that their actions had been part of a divine plan to save their family from famine. "God made me Lord in Egypt, so I could save your lives," he told them. Soon after, Jacob and Joseph were joyfully reunited in Egypt, and the entire family was settled there, living in peace and plenty, thanks to Joseph's faith and God's guiding hand. The end.
Moses, from prince to leader. Long ago in Egypt, Moses, a prince raised in Pharaoh's palace, faced a moment that would change his life. Despite his royal upbringing, Moses never forgot he was a Hebrew at heart. One day, he saw an Egyptian mistreating a Hebrew slave. Feeling a rush of protectiveness, Moses looked around and, seeing no one, stepped in to save the slave but ended up making a grave mistake. The very next day, Moses tried to stop a fight between two Hebrews, only to realize his secret was out. The news even reached Pharaoh, forcing Moses to flee to a faraway land called Midian for safety. In Midian, Moses found himself by a well where he helped the 7 daughters of Reuel, a priest, fend off some rude shepherds. Impressed by Moses' bravery, Reuel invited him home, leading to Moses marrying Reuel's daughter and starting a new life as a shepherd. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, the Hebrews suffered greatly under a new pharaoh. Their cries for help reached the heavens, and God was listening. 40 years had passed since Moses left Egypt, While tending his flock, Moses saw something incredible, a bush engulfed in flames that didn't seem to burn up. Curious, Moses went closer, only to hear God's voice calling him by name. God told Moses to take off his sandals, for he was standing on holy ground. God had a mission for Moses to lead the Hebrews out of Egypt and free them from slavery. Moses was scared and unsure, especially about speaking to Pharaoh. But God showed Moses miraculous signs, turning his staff into a serpent and then back again, and even curing his hand from leprosy to prove his power. Still hesitant, Moses worried about his speaking abilities. God, growing impatient with Moses' doubts, promised Aaron, Moses' brother, would help speak for him. Moses bid farewell to Jethro and set off to Egypt with his family. In the mountains, Aaron met Moses, and together they shared God's plan with the Hebrew leaders, who were amazed by the signs and worshipped God, filled with hope. Moses and Aaron then bravely approached Pharaoh, delivering God's message, "Let my people go." But Pharaoh's heart was hard. He refused to listen. God was ready to show his great power to change Pharaoh's mind, marking the beginning of an epic journey for Moses, from a prince in Egypt to a shepherd in Midian, and finally, a leader of his people. The end.
In ancient Israel, chaos reigned as the Midianites devastated the land. Amid despair, Gideon, a simple farmer, dared to defy them, secretly harvesting wheat to feed his family. His courage caught divine attention. An angel tasked him to lead a rebellion. Skeptical, Gideon sought signs from God, receiving undeniable miracles dew-laden. Fleece amidst dryness, then the reverse, bolstering his faith. With just 300 warriors, chosen by God to highlight divine might over human strength, Gideon staged a daring nighttime ambush. Armed merely with trumpets and torches, they sowed such confusion among the Midianites that they turned on each other in panic. The victory was staggering. The people hailed Gideon a hero, urging him to be king. But Gideon knew better, declaring only God as ruler. This gripping tale of faith, courage, and divine intervention shows that with belief in a higher power, the impossible becomes possible.
David and Goliath, the battle of faith. Hi everyone! Today, we're diving back to learn about a young hero named David. Last time, we saw how King Saul started to disobey God. Now, it's time for a new leader to rise. Samuel, the wise prophet, was sent by God to find a new king. He went to Bethlehem, bringing a young cow to sacrifice, trying not to stir suspicion from King Saul. When he met Jesse and his sons, Samuel thought surely the oldest, Eliab, would be the next king because he was tall and handsome. But God had other plans. God told Samuel, "Don't look at his height or his looks. I care about what's inside the heart." After 7 of Jesse's sons were passed by, there was still no king chosen. Then came David, the youngest, tending the sheep. As soon as Samuel saw David, God said, "He's the one." And right there, Samuel anointed David as the future king. Meanwhile, the Israelites were battling the Philistines, who had a giant warrior named Goliath. He was over 9 feet tall with heavy bronze armor and a massive spear. Goliath challenged the Israelites to a one-on-one fight for 40 days, but no one dared to face him. Enter young David, bringing food to his brothers on the battlefield. When he heard Goliath's taunts, he was shocked that no one stood up for God's honor. David said, "Oh, fight him." Saul doubted at first because David was just a youth. But David convinced him by telling about how he protected his sheep from lions and bears. David didn't wear King Saul's armor. It was too big. Instead, he took his sling and picked 5 smooth stones from a stream. Facing Goliath, David declared, "You come with weapons, but I come in the name of the Lord, with unshakable faith." David slung a stone that struck Goliath right in the forehead, toppling the giant. David's victory was stunning. He used Goliath's own sword to finish the battle, proving that faith in God is the most powerful weapon. This victory made David a hero and led him to serve in Saul's court, soothing the troubled king with his harp music. David's story teaches us that no matter how big our problems seem, we can overcome them with faith and courage. Remember, it's not the size of the warrior in the fight, but the size of the faith in the warrior. What challenges can you face with the courage of David? Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for more adventures from the Bible. See you next time.
Elijah, the prophet of miracles. Hi friends, today we're traveling back to the ancient kingdom of Israel to meet a remarkable prophet named Elijah, who brought God's messages during some tough times. Elijah lived when Ahab was king over Israel. And let me tell you, Ahab was not a good king. He and his wife Jezebel led the people away from God. Elijah had a tough job. He told King Ahab that because of their bad choices, there wouldn't be any rain for several years. Can you imagine that? A land with no rain at all? While the land was dry and thirsty, God had a special plan for Elijah. He sent him to a quiet valley where Elijah was fed in an amazing way. Ravens brought him bread and meat every morning and evening. Elijah drank water from a nearby brook. It was like having room service in the middle of nature. When the brook dried up, God sent Elijah on a new mission. He went to meet a widow who was very poor and preparing her last meal for herself and her son. Things looked bleak. When Elijah asked for some food, she was worried because she had so little. But Elijah told her, "Do not be afraid, to make a small loaf of bread for him first." Guess what? After she did, her jar of flour and jug of oil never ran out again, just as Elijah had promised. Every day she had enough to make more bread. It was a miracle that kept her family fed during the drought. But then something sad happened. The widow's son got very sick and stopped breathing. The widow was heartbroken and thought all was lost. But Elijah took the boy upstairs, prayed to God, and guess what? God brought the boy back to life. When Elijah handed him back to his mom, you can imagine how happy she was. Elijah's story shows us how God takes care of his people in amazing ways, even when things seem impossible. Like the widow, we can trust that God is always with us, ready to provide and help us through tough times. Thanks for watching our story of Elijah, the prophet of miracles. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell for more Bible adventures. Share what you learned today and keep exploring the wonders of the Bible. See you next time. Bye-bye. Elijah's Showdown. The Battle on Mount Carmel. Today, we're diving back into the amazing stories of the Bible to meet Elijah, the prophet of God. Last time, we saw how Elijah was fed by ravens and a kind widow during a terrible drought. Now, let's see what happens next. Remember, after Solomon, the kingdom of Israel split into two. The northern kingdom called Israel with 10 tribes and the southern kingdom called Judah with 2 tribes. Elijah was sent to the northern kingdom because all their kings were bad. One of the worst was King Ahab, who led the people to worship false gods. 3 years into the drought, God told Elijah it was time to go back to King Ahab and declare that the drought would end. On his way, Elijah met Obadiah, a good man working for the bad king. Obadiah was secretly hiding God's prophets from Queen Jezebel, who was trying to kill them. When Elijah asked Obadiah to get Ahab, Obadiah was scared. He thought Elijah might disappear and Ahab would be furious. But Elijah promised to stay put. So Obadiah went to get the king. And now the real excitement begins. Elijah told King Ahab to gather all the people of Israel and bring 450 prophets of the false god Baal and 400 prophets of the other false god Asherah to Mount Carmel. There, Elijah issued a challenge to show who the true God is. 2 bulls were placed on altars, one for Baal's prophets and one for Elijah. The God who sent fire to burn the bull would be the true God, said Elijah. The prophets of Baal went first. They danced and shouted, "Baal, send fire!" But nothing happened. Elijah teased them. Maybe you need to yell louder. Maybe he's asleep or on a trip. But Baal never answered. Now it was Elijah's turn. He built his altar with